It's the biggest sporting event in the world, but this year's FIFA World Cup will be different from all other World Cups. Ever since the 2022 edition was awarded to Qatar 12 years ago, the tournament has been mired in off-field controversy, from corruption in awarding the tournament to Qatar, to the fact that they had to move it to the winter to deal with the Qatari heat, to the treatment and deaths of thousands of migrant workers who built the stadium. But now, the attention is turning to Qatar's strict Sharia laws, which outlaw things such as sex outside of marriage, alcohol, and open homosexuality. All of these reasons have made many fans indifferent to an event which they have been looking forward to for years. So, with all things considered, was handing the World Cup to Qatar a mistake, or is some of the criticism unjustified? Should fans feel guilty about watching what is practically the largest sports washing event in history? How will this impact the public image and global reputation of Qatar? How will the 2022 FIFA World Cup play out?
So let's get to it. How will the World Cup play out? As always, we begin with a quick fire round of 30 seconds each and pick up the debate right after. Uri Levy, take the lead.
Yes, I think that, the big question here is whether it was a mistake or not. There is no one significant, clear answer for that, because yes, it's true. If we start and we look on the corruption and the process of receiving the right to host the World Cup, that was a mistake. That was a mistake by FIFA by agreeing, taking and being paid for and selling the rights to Qatar in this way. But everything that happened after, and the way Qatar dealt with the organization and building of this competition, we might see something that is a little bit one-sided in the discussion.
Right, Yuval, David, your take?
Well, firstly, it's a pleasure to be back on your show and to see Uri here again. Look, this is the first time that the World Cup has been held in the Middle East. The excitement for this extravaganza is absolutely dumbed down due to the human rights controversies in Qatar. It's draconian laws that restrict the freedoms of the LGBTQ community. I applaud the United States men's national team, which redesigned its logo, adding the rainbow colors in the stripes in response to the host nation's stance against homosexuality. I think this is a problem. We're sending athletes somewhere that is unsafe. It is illegal. Different than what your story said, not just is it illegal in Qatar to practice homosexuality openly, it's illegal to practice homosexuality at all.
Period. Yeah. And we'll get to all of this in a split second. Last but not least, Barnaby Lane. Sir, your take.
Thanks for having me on. I think it's a multifaceted question if you say, was Qatar a mistake? As Yuval said, was it a mistake to host a World Cup in the middle of a domestic soccer season in the winter? Yes. Was there mistakes made in the process of awarding it to Qatar? Yes. Was it necessarily a mistake to give the Middle East its first World Cup? Some would argue no. You could argue that this is a potential to shine the light on some of these problems that are going on in the country and hopefully ignite change. If this didn't happen, obviously those issues still exist. People wouldn't be aware. So
right, and to that point exactly, please feel free to interact from this point onwards, gentlemen. Qatari's claim it's all a manifestation of Western arrogance, so to speak, and racism. Do they have a point, Barnaby?
Yeah, obviously they have a point, because I want to say something about the discussion about the World Cup in recent years. Many people tend to forget that the discussion around World Cup 2022 was heavily infected by the Gulf crisis taking place in the past decade that was ended in 2017. But Saudi Arabia and the UAE and Bahrain and also Egypt were basically posing a blockade on Qatar, a financial blockade, but also I would say media blockade. And it's well known today that they funded a series of investigations and articles and basically built a very good and valid narrative why this World Cup is so bad. But the fact is, I don't remember a country that changed its laws, its actual constitutional laws, due to an outside external criticism regarding the way they are organizing and building a sports event. So, and Qatar did abolish the kafala system. Yeah, it takes time, to implement this kind of change, but they did make this change.
Right. Rome wasn't built in a day, and neither will Doha. And in this respect, Barnaby, maybe more than all else, it's convenient for us Westerners to discuss the grievances, but maybe it's a proof that the Western outlook is not that multicultural as we would like to think.
Yeah.
Barnaby.
I would maybe disagree with that statement that the Western culture is not as multicultural. I think to go back to your original point, to suggest that the criticism, for example, comes from a point of racism, I don't think that would be fair. These things are still happening, whether or not they're in the process of changing. There are issues that still exist in the country. Like we said, the treatment of migrant workers, the views on homosexuality and women's rights. So to shine a light on those, it isn't racist. It's only right to do so.
Yes.
Like I said previously, the hope is that by shining a light on it, and as the previous said, Qatar has already changed some of its rules for the tournament. Perhaps going forward, they can continue to change further and perhaps, change is the right word,
Yeah, and Yuval,
look, Barnaby, I completely agree with what you're saying, Barnaby. Perhaps this is a way to create change. These sporting events, these large cultural events, are a form of diplomacy. It's the way that people around the world come together to one place. I think that it is a mistake, and something I don't agree with you, Barnaby, is earlier you mentioned that it was a mistake maybe to do something in the winter or do something in a specific time period. I think that's a very different comparison here, where it's actually physically dangerous for certain athletes to go to a country where they could be arrested for homosexuality. I mean, just recently, the Qatar World Cup ambassador said that homosexuality is a damage of the mind, and it remains illegal in Qatar, even for visiting athletes. It is a dangerous situation to send people to a country where they can be arrested and imprisoned. We've already seen in the news what happens when an athlete is imprisoned, such as the story in Russia that has been all over the news.
Yeah.
I think this is a dangerous mistake to send athletes into a dangerous region that follows Sharia law.
And in this respect, Yuval, Uri, Blinken is in attendance or set to attend, signaling that despite the harsh criticism, at the end of the game, at the end of the day, everyone plays along. And we've seen so many protests. Really, not a day passing by without some kind of protest. At the end of the day, isn't it all just lip service? Shouldn't we have seen a harsher boycott if it is indeed in such stark contrast to Western values and morals?
Eli, I must tell you. Yeah, go on.
Please, Uri, go for it.
You're too polite, gentlemen. What's going on with you?
Fine, then I'll just go. Uri, you're the one in Israel. You should just cut me off. I'm in the state.
Where's the chutzpah?
This is why I'm trying to be polite.
Qatar outlawed homosexuality. It imposes a large fine and a prison sentence of up to 7 years for people who are convicted of being gay. We had a recent story on your own program talking about athletes being able to be out and proud, whatever their identity is, and how gender effect is represented in sports. Sports isn't only about the sports. It's also about the diplomacy. It's about countries coming together and how they interact. So if a country doesn't allow other citizens to be who they are and how they are, well, then the games shouldn't be in that country. And that's the power that we have with our Western, or just, let's say, democratic, open, and freedom desiring ways.
Yuval, I want to be not polite, and I will take advantage of the fact that I'm sitting here.
Hours before taking off to Qatar.
Yes, hours before taking off to Qatar, and basically, covering football in the Middle East and covering Middle Eastern sports, okay, and traveling the region from Morocco to Qatar, really, to the Gulf. The fact that Qatar, it's true, there are certain laws that written in, but if you think that there are no gays living in Qatar or in the Gulf, you are wrong. And it's very funny. I remember, I don't remember in which station I saw it, but one Western reporter asked, a question for one of the World Cup ambassadors. But what will happen if same-sex couple would like to go in the street and hold their hands? It shows so little knowledge of the Middle Eastern cultures that people here are also men walking together.
Yeah, adding to that, Uri, because we're running out of time, and I really want your take on that. Qatar is going to set up sobering up areas for people who are drinking too much. Is Qatar infringing here on human rights?
No.
Qatar is infringing.
Maybe the visitors should pay respect to their host.
Exactly. I think this is the point I want to say to Yuval. Think that not every country in the world you can act exactly like you act at home, but you can be yourself. Just respect the fact that outside you cannot do things like that. But nobody will get into your hotel room and will arrest you, whatever you do.
And that's false. No, that's false. Uri, that's false. I work with the Rainbow Railroad, which helps rescue LGBTQ people out of dangerous and life-threatening situations internationally.
Okay.
I also do the same thing for LGBTQ people, helping them escape Sharia law in different Arab countries, along with Dignity, LGBTQI, Freedom House, the White House, and the State Department. In Qatar, it is illegal. You can be arrested even for something you do in your own hotel room. Do you think that the Qatar authorities are so unaware of it that they will do it in a month like that, when the whole world and 1.8 I don't think that they're unaware of it, but I do think it's a risk. So you can travel with risk. Look, Israelis travel around the country, around the world. They go to places where Jews are not liked. I'm gay. I've traveled to places where I know I can't talk like this, or I can't be femme, or I can't hold my husband's hand, right? Those are actual risks. But those risks, this is one of the times that diplomacy can be pushed to try to change Qatar, to try to change Sharia law.
Who are we? I cannot. It's not even related. It's not related even to gay. Also, myself, I cannot go with my wife and kiss her in the middle of the streets in Qatar. It's okay, but I'm not expecting it from a place. It's not my culture.
Fine, but now if you go with your wife and kiss her, you're not going to be put in prison for 7 years. You're not going to be following.
You need to recheck. You need to recheck the laws of Qatar. What are the laws against kissing and making out in public? It's pretty similar. It's pretty similar.
Okay, gentlemen, we're putting a stop right here. Definitely not out of passion, but we are running out of time. So a quick break, and we're continuing this debate in a split second. Do not go anywhere. Welcome back to the summit. Still with us, Yuval, David, Uri Levy, and Barnaby Lane. Thank you, gentlemen, very much for staying with us. We're also staying on topic, but before we dive back into the conversation, let's take a listen to this feisty exchange between the Iranian coach and a British journalist. Sports and politics, profoundly intertwined. Let's take a listen.
Are you okay representing a country Iraq has got that repressive device?
To which channel you work?
Sky.
How much you pay me to answer to that question? You are a private company, how much you pay me? Talk with your boss, and at the end of the World Cup, I can give you the answer if you make me a good offer. Thank you.
Say it's an offer.
No, I'm saying to answer to that question, don't put in my mouth words that I did not say. I'm asking to your company how much you pay me to answer to that question. Okay?
Okay, thank you. We have 20 minutes now. Training open, please.
I think you should start to think about what happened with the evidence in England also. Think about it.
Thank you.
Yep. Let's get to it. Can sports and politics be kept apart? Or maybe following our previous conversation, should it really? Another quick fire round, and we pick up the conversation from there. Barnaby Lane, take the lead.
No, I think is a simple answer, especially football, soccer. It's just too big. The reality is that because sports and football are so popular, they're always going to be used as a platform sort of for portraying political ideologies. You know, you only have to look as far back as 2018 when Russia hosted the World Cup. They hosted what was known as the safest ever World Cup, you know, to project this good view of the nation. Now look where we are. China have done it in the past. All sorts of, you know, countries and governments have done it.
Yeah.
Qatar would like to be trying to do the same thing here, portraying itself as a great nation, so that the issues are sort of swept under the rug.
Right.
But
Didn't really happen.
Given the media spotlight that has come with it, perhaps that will happen less so than previous.
Yeah, Yuval David, your 30 seconds are on.
I'm still shaking my head from our last conversation where we talked about how beautiful Qatar is and how great their culture is. And yes, there are many beautiful things there, but women in Qatar need to have open permission from their male guardians in order to study abroad, in order to travel, to hold a governmental job. LGBTQ people, homosexuality is completely outlawed. These are major, major problems. So the fact that we're bringing sports to a country, well, maybe we can raise awareness. Maybe we can show people in Qatar different parts of lifestyle instead of homosexuality having to be closeted. Yes, there are LGBTQ groups in Qatar, but they face huge risks.
We will
That's
continue.
my point from our previous conversation.
Yes, and we'll continue in a split second, but Uri Levy, your 30 seconds are on.
Yeah, I'm completely in shock that yet again Yuval Arad is misquoting me and putting words in my mouth.
My name isn't Yuval Arad.
Yuval Arad. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry. Again, misquoting
30
me.
seconds all over again.
I don't appreciate that, but that's okay. Sports and politics cannot be, separated. It's not something that was invented around the World Cup in Qatar. It's something that goes way back in history, and I think that this year only with Russia, as Barnaby mentioned, a very thin line was crossed by banning Russia completely from all competition, from the IOC, from FIFA. Whether it's correct or not correct, this is something else. But the fact this is happened, and basically Russia was supposed to play the World Cup qualifiers. So imagine that.
And in this respect, before the conversation will naturally find its way back to human rights, I have a feeling. Is it proof that money can buy everything? And in the sense of sports washing, it's not just who is hosting, it's also Saudi buying a Newcastle, right? And Qatar buying
Saudi, it's China, it's Russia, it's everything, and this is what we need to understand. I think the World Cup in Qatar is becoming this field of clashing between the narratives and between the worlds. Maybe we're calling it now East and West, but basically what we are witnessing is a shift of power. The fact that there are other places rather than the US, UK and Western Europe with a lot of money to do habits that used to take place, for example, in the West, and now they're making them their own. I wonder what will be the reactions when India suddenly will become the wealthiest country in the world and will want to have a World Cup. And how people will react will they call again the Indian fans who are wearing Argentina shirt fake fans or paid fans? No, I think the world is changing. That's definitely geopolitically, and we see
the world definitely is changing, and right. The world definitely is changing, and money absolutely talks. I mean, Uri mentioned the issues with Russia. So Russia was banned, but we also can look at so many other countries that have human rights atrocities that are horrendous, and they haven't been banned. So why is one country being banned for really horrendous things and another country isn't? I do think that this, once again, is a form of diplomacy. It's a way for us to have cross-cultural communication, for people to witness and experience other people and other cultures and open their minds and learn more. But it's also a great opportunity for us, for activists and for the athletes and the teams to speak out about what they agree with and what they don't agree with in that culture, because ultimately these athletes are forms of diplomats representing
Barnaby Lane.
Also their country.
We're taking a listen now to Barnaby Lane, who's being too British for our feisty encounter.
Just to that point of you saying that if certain nations or Russians have been banned from sport, then why aren't other nations banned also for their human rights atrocities. Well, equally, I think the point you're trying to make is that we shouldn't be going to Qatar because of their human rights atrocities. Then should we not have also gone to Russia? Because there's similar issues that exist in that country. Perhaps they're not by law. It's not illegal to be homosexual in Russia, but I can certainly imagine it's not particularly pleasant to be a homosexual person in Russia. So should the World Cup have not happened there because of that?
Yeah, probably
Exactly.
not. And you know what, Yuval, I must ask you. Okay, yes. Aside everything that Barnaby said, and I agree with both of you in this manner. Yeah, and again, I don't think that any life of even one person is worth a tournament or a football game. This is not a discussion. This is a basic thought. Yeah, but I do think that us living in New York and in London or Northampton, and I'm living in Tel Aviv. This city, for example, is built on the backs of migrant workers with no status, with no rights and low salaries. And I believe that in New York you can find also these people, and also in the UK. So suddenly it's such an important issue to highlight and to put the focus on.
Yes.
And I think who am I to judge?
No. I hear what you're saying, and I completely agree. I don't think that it's fair for one country to whitewash and erase their past crimes and the things that they've done in order to have the successes that they have today. I definitely don't support that, and you make a great point. But we can still call it out wherever it exists. Our cultures and our societies have learned that we do need to have consequences.
Yuval, would you call it out on the 2026 World Cup that is taking place in the US? Everything that's happening now with the abortion?
We are nearing.
Would you do it?
Absolutely.
We're nearing the end of our discussion. Yes. Barnaby Lane, I have
I
a
wouldn't
question.
ban the World Cup. But
Barnaby Lane, I have a very simple question. In a few days, it is game on. Should fans feel guilty about watching?
No, I don't think so. I think the reality is that there was not enough work been done over the last 10 years to feel guilty now. We should have felt guilty 10 years ago if we were going to feel guilty, and put in and FIFA and whoever else it might have been, put in those changes to make sure that this was a safe tournament, and that the rights of workers were maintained and looked after before. But as a fan, I don't think you can be held responsible for the decisions that are out of your hands.
As a Jewish woman, let me tell you that, Barnaby, you can never have enough guilt. You can always load up some more.